Why has the offense continued to struggle under head coach Erik Spoelstra? We open up the mailbag to answer that and much more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and subscribe on YouTube. A reminder that now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are opening up the mailbag today throughout the thunder and the rain here in Miami. We've got questions about Erik Spoelstra's offenses, options for the starting five, and what happens if Jimmy Butler leaves next summer. But we're going to start with this one. Of all the pressing things, from Drew, who writes in, go back to the Vice style. In fact, do a full Vice rebrand. Not so much as a question as a statement. Drew, of course, is talking about responding to our conversation yesterday about the Heat's culture jerseys, the new City editions coming out. And Drew, and I think this is a sentiment shared with many Heat fans, I think they'd be down to just go full Vice, make that the permanent look for the Miami Heat. What do you think?
I'm not so sure. I don't know if that's realistic either, right? Because if they got their established brand and think about the playoffs, you've got red hot playoffs, white hot Heat, etc. Like I think the red, white, and black combination in some order is basically the standard and will continue to be so, I think, throughout the entirety of this franchise history. So that's like saying and I hate to use the Boston Celtics as an example, but let's say they should switch it up and have like blue jerseys. That wouldn't make much sense. So I don't think the Heat are likely to switch that up either. But as far as like the rebrand is concerned, like a relaunch of similar Vicely jerseys and apparel, I don't even know what that would look like. It's just incorporating the same pink, white, and blue color scheme that they were using in Vice, and then just doing it in some kind of different way.
Yeah,
it could work.
Or just bringing back the most popular ones. Like we have the black one, we've got the pink one, and we've got the white one, and that would just be your rotation, just like the Heat have a black one, a white one, and a red one. I think first of all, we know it's not realistic. The Heat would never do this. I guess the conversation isn't whether or not it's realistic. It's whether or not we would be interested in them doing it hypothetically, but which might not even be worth a conversation at all. But here we are. Where do you think I fall on this?
I think you're all for it. I think you're all about it. I know how much you like the red ones, but the Vice being what they are, and I know how much you appreciate them. I think you would be totally fine with that being the norm rather than the exception.
So I actually don't want that.
Oh,
this is not how I prefer. Just leave it. I think you're right. I think it's a fair comparison to make to the Celtics or the Lakers or whatever. Like these jerseys, they've just been the standard jersey for this franchise for a long time, and obviously not as long as the Lakers or the Celtics. But this is the Heat jersey in some way, shape, or form. They've only had one major sort of difference between basically the 90s and now, but I think the jerseys are so clean. They're iconic almost. Like they're just associated with the Miami Heat in such a way, and these are the jerseys that they wore for all of their championship runs, even after like the 90s Alonzo Mourning style. Like they never won a championship in those. They won championships in these. Right. You can't get rid of them. They're perfect jerseys, and that's why they haven't changed them. So no, I do wonder, but like I said before, this is a sentiment shared with a lot of Heat fans, and I would bet, not to do like the whole age and generalities thing, but I would bet the younger fan prefers would love the Vice jersey because maybe they just don't have the same attachment to the jerseys that like maybe an older fan does. And I'm 33 years old. I don't know if that qualifies as an older fan, but it's certainly older than maybe like the Gen Z sort of younger generation.
I'm curious because, why haven't they done like a retro week? Like they used to do that, or like I remember during the Dwayne Wade, Shaq era, and even during the Big Three era, like they brought back the Miami Floridians jersey,
top 3 or 4 jersey, all time.
And there were a couple of others that they had brought back from like Heat franchise history, and like I don't see why they couldn't do that with like maybe a Vice Culture edition.
So I am fairly certain that the Floridians, that was still during the Adidas era. When Adidas was the Heat outfitter or the NBA outfitter. I don't know that matters, but so much of this is controlled by Nike, right? And sort of that branding arm and all these things. But here's my proposal. You know how most of the City Edition jerseys suck?
Yeah.
I think once you get a good one, you get to just keep it. And that just becomes your City Edition jersey. So you have your standard jerseys. You got your throwbacks, right? Like, throwbacks are still a thing. Like, there's no reason why the Heat couldn't make the Floridians jersey a throwback for a year, right? I don't see a reason unless Nike has a specific rule against how many throwbacks you're allowed to kind of go through and cycle through, but a year to year.
Doesn't seem that way.
Right? I mean, you can go. I know the Heat typically go with their black throwback. They haven't really gone with the white throwbacks in a while. I can't remember. I could be totally wrong on that, but I just can't recall. But or the red ones for that matter. But like, why not just like, if you can go, you cycle through your City Edition jerseys until you land on a good one that works, and then you just lock it in. Now, I think the obvious pushback would be like, well, we can't keep branding it. We can't keep selling more jerseys. We can't keep marketing it. My pushback on that is, sure you can. People buy jerseys all the time. People buy jerseys of new players. Get new players, they'll buy a new Vice jersey. Just like people have a Dwayne Wade regular Heat jersey, they have a Jimmy Butler regular Heat jersey, they have a Bam Adebayo regular Heat jersey. Who cares about the actual jersey? It's about the players. That's why people want the jerseys. So just make sure the jerseys are good and not pushing people away from buying them, right? Like, we did that poll, 83% of our audience won't buy a Heat Culture red jersey. Even if they want it. Even if they want the player, right? Like, they'll just go buy the other one. They'll buy the normal Heat jerseys that we all like. But if you had a Vice jersey, maybe they would buy that one. Maybe they would buy 2 Jimmy Butler jerseys. And then when Jimmy Butler leaves, maybe they buy 2 Bam Adebayo jerseys. And when Bam Adebayo leaves, maybe they buy 2 Luka Doncic Miami Heat jerseys. Just saying. But, like, you know what I mean?
Sure.
If you get a good one, lock it in. And I feel like the Heat had the first good one.
Perhaps. Shall we move on from uniform talk?
Probably.
Is there something? Okay.
No, we probably should get to more important things. This question comes from Julio. Again, not as much of a question and so much as a statement. Spo is an overrated coach. He comes out right out the gate. Aggressive beginning. That's tough lead. He has a 54% winning percentage. I haven't fact checked any of this. 54% winning percentage, 0 championships, and his offenses are always bottom 5 in the NBA without LeBron. The Heat lost to the Celtics 6 out of 7 times last season, and by the end of the season, barely beat the Pistons and Wizards. His assistants never do anything but get fired when they're given a chance to coach their team. This is aggressive. There's a reason why no team wants Chris Quinn. Wow, I should have probably read this first. Spo's small
Shots
ball
fired everywhere.
Gets, right? Yeah. Jeez, drive-by after drive-by. Spo's small ball gets our players hurt continuously. He's not a number 1 coach. This was in response to our discussion on CBS ranking Spo, their number 1 coach in the league. There's a lot there. I probably shouldn't have read that whole thing because it was, again, very aggressive. The part I want to figure, and like, it's easy to just sort of like do what I did right now and just sort of like clinch and just be like, I don't want to talk about this guy.
Right.
But the fact, he did get me thinking. His offenses are always bottom 5 without LeBron James, and of course I know that not to be true. But the sentiment overall, has Erik Spoelstra ever had a consistently good offense since LeBron left? I think that is a fair question, and trying to decipher why that might be and if there's a fix there, I think is worth our time. And so I put this graph up here, or I put a graph together kind of showing the evolution of Erik Spoelstra's offenses over the last 10 years, over the last several years, basically since he got the head coaching job in 2008. We'll talk about that, and then we'll kind of go and shift over to the defensive side of the ball a little bit later in the show. But let's take our break here, David, and then we'll get into how Erik Spoelstra can fix this offense and if he actually does have an offensive problem. We'll do that after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook for many reasons. Well, we've got something a little different for you because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Your Dolphins are taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Supersonics, gosh, too much basketball in the brain. Seattle Seahawks on Sunday evening, Sunday late afternoon. What do you like in that game?
You know what? Screw it. I like the Dolphins. But I'm
All
not
right,
putting any money on them in FanDuel.
Go Seattle. It's a clear win. If you're listening to this,
Yeah, that's
take some
true.
easy money. It's Seattle, 100%.
Just go
Then
against
with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game, and all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. Today, I was joined by my co-host on Locked On NBA, Adam Mares from Locked On Nuggets, and we talked about whether or not LeBron James or Steph Curry will be the next person, or is more likely to win another championship. We talked about if Chet Holmgren or Paolo Banchero is more likely to be the better player long-term, and we did a lot of things in the spirit of the more likely type of theme. But talking more about Erik Spoelstra here. So can he, go to Julio's question, always has a bottom five offense? Obviously that's not true, but I took a look. I put this graph together. You can see it if you're watching us on YouTube, and I'll kind of read about it if you're listening on audio. The Heat's offense under Spo, since he took over in the 2008 season, has pretty much stayed above league average. If you're looking at the chart here, it was just at the fringe of the bottom 10 his first year. Of course, we remember the first couple of years that he took over. It was Dwayne Wade and bust. So the only reason the Heat were even, breathing offensively was because Dwayne Wade was having probably his best individual seasons of his career. So those are the first couple of years. And then obviously we get the Big Three era, and the Heat are just consistently top 10 in offense. They're second in offensive rating that first year with LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. And they just kind of stay there. But then after the Big Three era, LeBron James leaves in 2014. They go right back down, back into the bottom 10 in offense that year. That's expected when you lose a guy like LeBron James, who your entire team is built around. But just on the fringe of the bottom 10, but in the bottom 10 nonetheless. They kind of bounce back. They get the Goran Dragic trade, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade. They bounce back. They're about a little bit better than league average the following year. Then after that, basically 2 more years in the bottom 10. There's the Josh Richardson leading scorer year, which was the worst this offense has ever been. They get Jimmy Butler. They shoot back up into the top 10 for just 1 year. But that was it. Jimmy Butler's first year in Miami was the last time this team has been top 10 in offensive rating. Basically, since then, they've hovered mostly around league average, but then bottom 10 the last 2 years. And you can also see on the bottom of this chart here, the leading scorer for each of those seasons. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 years in the top 10 and 5 years in the bottom 10. David, do you think Erik Spoelstra has a problem coaching great offenses?
No, I do not. I think it's a matter of personnel, and I don't think that's necessarily entirely on Erik Spoelstra. I just think it's also the reality. Like, to the larger question that we were asked about Erik Spoelstra and why he's overrated and so many different shots fired. Like, I mean, Greg Popovich was by and large widely accepted as the best coach in the NBA for well over a decade. And look what happens when you lose 3 Hall of Famers on your roster that have defined championship success for you for that decade. Like, you're barely a lottery team. You're struggling. You're I know you kind of lean into it as a franchise and you want to go for the top pick, and that's why you got Victor Wembanyama, et cetera. But I mean, they've been a team that has not been able to cobble together a lot of wins for a long time now. And I don't think that's a reflection of who Greg Popovich is or what he does as a coach and what he does successfully. You have to have quality personnel. And I think if there's one thing that might be proof that Erik Spoelstra is a good coach, is that despite the fact that they've had a bad offense, that they've still been a team that has achieved a great deal of success. And I know a lot of that is also due to Jimmy Butler and his ability to rise to the occasion, but Erik Spoelstra has been able to get the most out of really bad rosters. And if anything, that's the proof of that. If you look at the 1 year, that's an aberration, because you're basically talking about the Big Three era and then the 2019-20 season that was cut short by COVID. So maybe that's a part of it too, is that it was cut short and there's not a full 82 game sample to kind of read into this. But one thing that kind of stands out to me, a floor spacing big that they have not had in those years in between. And of course, there was Chris Bosh and a very dynamic offense with 2 of the top 5 players in the NBA, in Dwayne and LeBron James. And then in 2019-20, you had Myers Leonard and Kelly Olynyk spacing the floor at such a high level that I wonder how much that contributed to that kind of spacing that Miami has just not been able to sustain over the last 4 seasons.
That's a great call, and it's not something that I had thought of. You know, to me, it does come back down to personnel, right? That's like the Heat also haven't had a 27 point per game score since LeBron James in 2014.
Wow.
They haven't had
Unbelievable.
anybody. That's an unreal stat. They have had a top 10 offense once since the Big Three era. That's 10 years ago. So they've had one top 10 offense in 10 years. That's a crazy stat for a team that has achieved the amount of things that the Miami Heat have achieved, right? And even since the Big Three era, the conference finals, 2 NBA finals appearances, the amount of success that they had, the constant amount of winning, and they've done it all without a top 10 offense in today's NBA is pretty wild. And it does speak to, I think, Erik Spoelstra being the best coach in the NBA. And that's why most people accept now Erik Spoelstra as the best coach in the NBA, even if some fans disagree and they're frustrated. But I understand also being frustrated with the lack of offense. I do think that there are things that he can do better offensively. Embracing some of the ball movement stuff that has kind of gone away over these last couple of years, spacing the floor, trying to figure things out. But you can only do so much without the right personnel. They haven't had a 27 point per game score. They haven't had anybody average more than, I think, 23 points per game in a single season since LeBron. That's
Wow.
you can't build a functional offense around like everybody eats, like a top 10 offense. You just can't. It can't just be ball movement, beautiful game stuff. That's not, the NBA doesn't work that way. There's not a top 10 offense where everybody's just sharing the ball and everybody's happy, kumbaya. That doesn't work. You need a dominant player to create not just score the ball all the time, create advantages on the court, right? Create mismatches that you can then take advantage of. And then you're passing out to open corner threes. Like, it's just, this team is always in the mud. They are struggling for every shot. They're going deep into the shot clock to just try to elbow their way into any amount of space. And that's just not viable offensively. And it is in large part due to the personnel. And that's not really blaming anybody on the roster. I'm not blaming anybody on the roster. They just don't have that. That's not anybody's game. It's never been Jimmy Butler's game to be that player. And it's never been anybody else on this roster's game. They just haven't had a guy who does that. And it speaks to why they've been trying to find that guy who does that, for the record, but they failed to do that. So it's a failure on the front office. I do think it's a little bit of a failure on the coaching staff, but it's mostly it's mostly just they haven't had that
reflection.
guy.
Yeah,
they just haven't had that guy. All right, let's move it along here. JR writes in all of your potential starting fives, who is guarding the best guard or wing on the other team? So essentially, the best perimeter scorer on the other team. So I guess we can have this conversation. Like, when you're thinking about your starting five, are you thinking about somebody who has to guard the best perimeter scorer? And if so, who is that player?
I would have to say it's Jimmy Butler. I mean, I know that the team kind of discusses it and they kind of come to an agreement about who picks up what and you know how it works out. But given Miami's switchability and the switch heavy defense that we've seen them incorporate, for better and for worse, I don't know that it necessarily matters. My feeling is that it would be Jimmy Butler who would take on that assignment, but everybody else will get their opportunities as well. So I don't know if that's the kind of answer that you might be looking for, but I would say it's going to be primarily Jimmy.
Well,
I don't think there's anybody else in the roster that can do it.
Right. I mean, if we're going with the starting five that ended last year, the preferred starting five that ended last year, Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, Bam Adebayo, it's got to be Jimmy. Yeah. Right? It's not going to be Tyler. It's not like Bam. No. If he's the center, he's going to be guarding big men. He's not going to be guarding on the perimeter. Now, maybe you can find a couple of minutes there where, in certain matchups, where Nico is guarding fives a little bit, and you can move Bam out to the perimeter, like we've seen them do against Boston, for instance. They'll put Nico on Porzingis or Horford, and then Bam will go out and guard Tatum or Jaylen Brown, and then Jimmy Butler will get the other one. You can find ways to do that. So in that starting five, it will be and has been Jimmy Butler. Like, Jimmy Butler guard Devin Booker when the Suns are in town. Like, that's just what happens. I guess my argument here would be he shouldn't, right? At 35 years old, you're trying to get the most consistent, more available, more honestly offensively focused Jimmy Butler this year. He probably shouldn't be using all that energy on the defensive end, right? He's got to use some, but also what makes Jimmy Butler special defensively is not his one-on-one defense, although he's elite at one-on-one defense when he's engaged. It's the off-ball defensive stuff, right? The cornerback with the pick sixes and all those things. That's what makes Jimmy Butler special defensively. And that's why I keep arguing that they need to start Haywood Highsmith. It's just to have somebody out there on like and maybe they can, you get into it as your rotations go on and whatever, but it's just like, no, by then there's too many good perimeter scorers in today's league where if you wait 5-6 minutes, like you could be down by 8 to 10 points. Like we've seen so much. Like all of the last season felt like the Heat were always starting down 6 or 7 points. And that's kind of how you get there, is you just make it easy for your opponent in the first couple of minutes. And that's why I keep going back to, look, Nikola Jovic has made strides defensively. He's not a good one-on-one defender. Even if we start Jaime Jaquez Jr., the way we talked about last week, he's not a good one-on-one defender. He's a better team off-ball defender. Basketball Index has like their player grades and in specific situations. And for isolation defense, perimeter isolation defense last season, Highsmith was an A+, Bam was an A, which is crazy because, again, he's a center. Caleb Martin was an A. He's not on the roster anymore. Jimmy Butler was an A-. Terry Rozier, surprisingly, was an A-, but he graded out really poorly in basically everything else. So it's a little bit of more of a situational thing where he kind of occasionally got isolated on an island, but like his screen navigation is not good. And oh, by the way, the eye test bears all of this out too. This is not just me doing advanced metric stuff. Josh Richardson was a B+. We don't know if he's going to be an every night player. Tyler Hero is a C, a little bit surprisingly. Jaime was a D. Duncan Robinson was an F. And Nikola Jovic was an F. Yeah. This is just all one-on-one defense on the perimeter. That's all this is. So this all makes sense, right? And so you look at this list and you're like, all right, so basically, well, Caleb Martin's in Philadelphia now, so it's Haywood and Jimmy. Those are the options. Yeah. And I would argue start both of them. Just start both of them. Because the only other, if you're not going to be elite enough defensively, then you got to be able to outscore teams. And we just, as we covered, they ain't doing that. That's not happening. So, I don't know. I just say lean into it.
Terry, Highsmith, Jimmy, Nico, Bam.
Terry or
That's
Tyler.
not bad,
I don't care. Yeah, either
Terry.
one.
I think Terry would have to start. I mean, again, I know it's unrealistic, but my feeling is that in terms of having somebody, if you're going to lean into what we saw from Highsmith last year, which is he's going to be, a 40% shooter, and obviously that's on fairly low volume. If he's going to be that kind of player, a 3-and-D, like the first 3-and-D that Miami's had since Jay Crowder, maybe, I guess PJ Tucker for a brief time there, but
yeah, he could be their KCP.
Yeah, sure. I guess that works. Then you're going to need somebody else that can attack the rim and be able to put some points up. And I that's why I'd lean Rozier in that sense.
And by the way, also Jimmy's got to do that too. And so much of his job this year is going to be on the offensive end, which is why I think you got to save him a little bit on the defensive end. Just my take. I could totally be wrong. Anyway, we got a few more questions. What should the Heat do if Jimmy Butler leaves next summer and they don't get anything in return? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Shogun, like the Emmy-winning show, writes in, what do the Heat do if Jimmy leaves this offseason and get nothing in return? Do you think they pay Jimmy the max if he does produce a good regular season but on the playoffs? So we got two questions here. We'll take on the first one. What do the Heat do if Jimmy leaves this offseason and they get nothing in return? So, at the risk of just always talking about Jimmy Butler leaving, this one is a little bit different. This is assuming that he leaves. Let's just play the hypothetical out. Like, he's opts out. The Heat don't get anything for whatever reason. They just don't. And he's playing for another team next year, 2 years from now, whatever. What do they do? I think it's a really good question. What do you think?
Well, that doesn't necessarily free up a whole heck of a lot of cap space or anything like that either, right? I mean, his departure.
No, it would create about. I mean, you keep talking, and I'll actually do the math really quick.
Yeah, no, it's a minimal. Well, maybe not a minimal amount, but it's not. Oh, he's going to get paid $55 million by the Brooklyn Nets. That's fine. That doesn't mean Miami has $55 million to play with.
No, it would create. So it would take them way. I just did it. It would take them way under the luxury tax would no longer be a concern. At least, with that roster, and it would create $12.9 million in cap space according to my calculations. That could be a couple million off or something, but $12 to $13 million in cap space.
Yeah, let's say even go crazy and say it's $15 million of cap space. What's that going to do for you? You're going to be able to shore up this roster. You're going to lean into what you've already got as far as your young core. Maybe you can get some different players around that can maybe complement Bam and Jaime, I would imagine, as they view them as the core future for this team. I don't know if Tyler fits into that vision, so they might explore trades for Tyler. So that's a possibility. I mean, again, either Tyler or Terry. And I don't know. If you had the choice of either, you could make an argument for both because, Tyler is a younger player and he has room to grow. And we debated that on this show also. So, but I don't think that there's any kind of immediate salve or anything like that. I don't think they're going to be able to just fix this or anything else. I think they're going to lean into Jaime being the Jimmy replacement and then just kind of continue to complement players. What's that?
You start building through youth. You use your draft pick. You start building through your youth, right? You just start doing stuff like that. Now, let's say it's $13 million in cap space, right? According to my math here. Duncan Robinson's contract is partially guaranteed. You could waive him outright and create $10 million. You don't have to trade him. You owe him $9 million, but you could waive him and create $10 more million. So that would add another $10 million to that cap space. Now we're talking about $23 million ish in space. That's a decent amount of space. Like you could figure you're not getting a max player, obviously, but $20 million, that's a good player that you can get back. And then you'll have maybe the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. You're not replacing Jimmy Butler by any stretch, but those are how you would, okay, Jimmy Butler's gone. Let's go get a decent, kind of like what the Warriors did this year. Klay Thompson's out. That was a big, part of our salary cap. He's out. We got some financial flexibility. Let's go get DeAnthony Melton. Let's add a Kyle Anderson. Like that's kind of let's go get a Buddy Hield. Yeah, like little fringe roster moves that kind of bolster the back end of the roster. Maybe give you a little bit more optionality, some lineup versatility. But there's no question that you're a worse team, right? And so you just kind of add those pieces, but you build through the youth. You just say, okay, Bam, it's your team. Tyler Hero, can you take that next leap? You're going to have a lot more responsibility on your shoulders. Let's see what happens in year 7 at that point. Whatever Terry Rozier can muster. Maybe Khalil Ware is ready to take that next step. And by the way, Jimmy Butler's gone. That's one less not floor spacer that you have to worry about when building out the team. Maybe now you can start Khalil and Bam. Maybe Bam all year is averaging 33% on 1.5 3-pointer attempts per game. And Khalil Ware, by the time the playoffs come around, has made that Derek Lively type of leap that we hope that he's going to make. And now it's like, okay, cool. Let's build around Ware and Bam and just put 3 floor spacers around those guys because now Jimmy's not here. And now we can actually just replace him with a guy who shoots threes at a high volume, perhaps.
Yep.
Maybe we can find that guy at $20 million or whatever. So those would be the options. That doesn't mean it's better or worse, but the question was, what do you do? And that's probably what you do. Do you think they pay Jimmy the max if he does produce a good regular season, but not in the playoffs? So a regular season Jimmy, not a playoff Jimmy. Do you pay regular season Jimmy the max?
I think they do. Okay. So does it translate like Jimmy has his great season? Does it translate into a title in this theoretical situation?
You got to ask Shogun. I don't know. I would say if he doesn't produce a good regular season, or if he's good in the regular season but not in the playoffs, I'm going to go ahead and assume the Heat are not winning the championship. That seems impossible if Jimmy Butler.
So that's the question, that he would do well in the regular season but not in the playoffs.
And yeah, maybe the Heat are a first round or a second round and out, and that's it.
No, then I think you can still use that. Like it's got to be both. You can't just. It's got to be the 82 games. It's got to be the 16 wins after that, or else it doesn't matter. I think that's.
I would venture to say that there's no way they pay him the max. I'm not reporting anything. I'm just I'm just guessing. Like I'm just saying like he's going to be 36 next year. You know, contracts in the NBA, they don't pay you for what you've done. They pay you for what you're going to do. And if Jimmy wins a championship on an elite level right now, you could still can you really look at Jimmy Butler and say, yeah, this guy's best years are ahead of him? I don't think you could say that when he's going into his age 36 season. I don't think that you could realistically say that. You could look at LeBron and say, well, he's doing it. But that's a one of one, right? That's how you get in trouble. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to rule it. I shouldn't have said that. I don't see him doing it either way. I really don't want that to come. People aggregate stuff. Please don't aggregate that. I'm just saying, you pay players for what they will do in the NBA, not for what they've done, rightly or wrongly. NBA contracts are a projection. They're for the next 4 or 5 years. They are not for what you don't get paid for what you used to do. Last question here. You know what? Yeah, we got 2 minutes here. Should Miami prep for a Jimmy Butler departure by trading for a scoring 4 like Kyle Kuzma, I guess?
Oh,
Shouldn't even have read
no.
this one. No, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. You
no.
don't prepare
I'm
for
sorry.
Jimmy to leave by like going and getting. If you want Kyle Kuzma, go trade for him, but not because Jimmy Butler might leave. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Kuzma's game. Like I like the association of Kuzma, like because of one, he's won a championship, and he was kind of an underdog himself, and he kind of leaned a little too heavily once he got to Los Angeles, and he kind of, I think, overvalued himself to a certain degree. Which, you know what, it's fine to be
Got
confident, and
paid.
everybody in the NBA is that. Yeah, got paid, etc. But I don't know that it necessarily translates into anything tangible. Like, it's
So
just a lot of
I'm
empty stats for me.
I'm with you, but I'm all like I think he's a better player than he's been in Washington. Like the guy can contribute to a championship winning team,
It
as
is
we saw
Washington,
with
yeah.
the Lakers, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, and the Wizards. But um, he's a player who needs a change of scenery. I'll go back to what I said before. Like it would be a little bit like the Terry Rozier trade in trading for Kyle Kuzma. It's like another guy who can score 20 points per game. Like the Heat got plenty of guys who could score 20 points per game. Tyler, Jimmy, Bam.
Right.
If you add Kuzma, nobody there is averaging 26, 27 points per game. And you like it doesn't like the NBA doesn't work that way. You don't just build 20-point scores on top of each other and get to some sort of magic where we score 120 points per game. The NBA doesn't work that way. You need an advantage creator. You need a dominant offensive force that makes things easier for everybody else. Kuzma's not that. If the Heat are going to trade for if the Heat trade for a player whose job is to score the ball, it has to be that elite level scorer. You can't really make an in-between move anymore. And by the way, I don't think they ever wanted to make an in-between move. I don't even think they really wanted to do envisioned making a Terry Rozier type of trade until Kyle Lowry just became so unplayable that they had to do something. But they've always been chasing that Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard kind of guy for a good reason. That's why they've been doing it. All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Have a great weekend. We will be back next week.